Hello and welcome back to the Micro Learning Institute. In this short tutorial we're going to look at a question called Kappa from the December 2010 DIP IFR paper. And in this question we're asked to compute the basic and diluted earnings per share of Kappa for the year ended the 30th of September 2010. Now in all these type of questions the first thing we need to do is get control of the timeline under which the shares were issued. And in this question, we're told that between the 1st of October and the 31st of December 2009, that's a period of 3 months, the number of shares in circulation were 70 million shares. On the 1st of January, and running until the 30th of September 2010, which of course is a 9-month period, we had a 2-for-7 rights issue. Now a 2-for-7 rights issue, when we had 70 million shares in circulation, resulted in an additional 20 million shares being issued, which of course meant that cumulatively for the second 9 months of the year we had a total of 90 million shares in circulation. Now again, in all cases when we see a rights issue we must calculate what we refer to as the theoretical ex-rights price. The theoretical ex-rights price says that before this right was issued any shareholder would have 7 shares, and each of those shares, we're told in the question, is valued at $1.80 each. So consequently, prior to the issue of the right, each individual shareholder would have a total value of $12.60 worth of shares. That 7 shares entitled the shareholder to the right to receive an additional 2 shares at a discount to the market value, and this discount was at $1.35. So we issued them with an additional value of $2.70. So that post the right or ex-right, each shareholder would now have a total of 9 shares who theoretically would be valued at $15.30. So consequently, if their 9 shares are theoretically going to be valued at $15.30, theoretically the ex-rights price per share is $1.70. So this gives the shareholders a bonus at which we issue them for 170 shares which have a current value of 180. And this bonus factor is something that we're going to use in the calculation of the weighted average number of shares. And when we look at the weighted average number of shares, we look at each period and how many shares were in circulation and whether or not they became eligible to the bonus and what the cumulative weighted average of those shares for that period was. So the first period we'll look at is from the 1st of October to the 31st of December. And as we said, there were 70 million shares in circulation for this 3-month period. Now, this 3-month time-weighted average number of shares became eligible for the bonus of the rights issue. And as we said, the bonus factor was 1.8 over 1.7. Now when we multiply 70 million by 3/12 by 1.8 over 1.7, we find that the time-weighted average effect of the 70 million shares was 18.529 million shares. Similarly, when we look at the second period from the 1st of January to the 30th of September, we see that there were 90 million shares in circulation for this 9-month period. Now of course these shares came into existence post the rights issue, so they do not become subject to the rights issue. So consequently the time-weighted average effect of these 90 million shares for 9 months is 67.5 million shares. So the time-weighted average number of shares for the year is the sum of the 18.529 million and the 67.5 million, which is 86.029 million. And this time-weighted average number of shares value is critical to the calculation of basic earnings per share. Now, when we look at the basic earnings per share, we see we need to look at the earnings. Now, the actual reported earnings for the period, we're told in the question, is $35 million. However, of course, the earnings that are considered for the earnings per share calculation exclude the effect of any earnings issued or attributable to preference dividend holders. And again, we have 30 million shares in circulation, 30 million preference shares in circulation, and each of those are entitled to a 6-cent per share dividend. So consequently, we need to deduct the reported earnings figure of 35 million by 1.88 million, giving us an updated earnings figure which is eligible for basic earnings per share of $33.2 million. Now we've already calculated that the weighted average number of shares is $86.029 million. So consequently the basic earnings per share is 38.6 cents. That is the $33.2 million divided by the 86.029 million shares. The next thing we begin to look at is the diluted earnings per share. Now again, we're just restating the basic position here where we had earnings attributable to basic earnings per share of $33.2 million. We had the weighted average number of shares of 86.029 million shares, and we had basic earnings per share of 38.6 cents. But we now need to consider the potential shares that might come into circulation. Now, we have a loan note in circulation which may be at the future convertible into shares. Now, the loan note, we're told, is for $23 million, and the effective interest rate at which interest is being charged to the P&L is 7%. So consequently, if this loan note in the future is redeemed, the P&L earnings will increase by that 7% of the $23 million. However, of course, the earnings figure that we consider for basic and diluted earnings per share is the after-tax earnings figure. And as tax, we're told in this question, is charged at 20%, only 80% of the savings will be achieved to the P&L. So consequently, our earnings in the P&L will increase by $1.288 million once the loan note is redeemed. The number of shares, there are 20 million shares, convertible loan note shares in circulation, so the number of shares will increase by 20 million. So when we look at the updated position for diluted, the earnings for diluted will increase from 33.2 million by 1.288 million to a total of 34.488 million. The number of shares will increase from a basic number of 86.029 by 20 million to 106.029 million shares, and consequently our diluted earnings per share then will reduce from 38.6 cents basic earnings per share to 32.5 cents fully diluted earnings per share. Thank you very much for watching this short tutorial from the Micro Learning Institute.